Hi everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Slidin into my DMs, part of the D4 network. This is the show on the network that is basically a D&D talk show. We talk about D&D rules, we talk about D&D news, and we give tips for playing the game and for being a dungeon master. So anyway, my name's Colby. Thanks for being here and happy to have you. And as usual, I shouldn't say as usual, because it wouldn't be sliding into my DMs if I didn't always have some of my DMs with me. So we have Tori, the dungeon mistress. Hi, Tori. Thanks for being here. Dallin, the Blackthorn, Mr. Rogers.
Hello.
And Preston as well. Venom. Preston.
Venom.
Viscount Venom.
Viscount Vicky.
It's
Venom. Yes.
Baby
About the V's. So we are doing attempt number 2 at a in-person recording. I think we have solved our audio issues from the last time we tried to do this a couple of weeks ago.
Fingers crossed.
Think so.
Preston, point above yourself. Check that one to know what I'm talking about.
It was pretty bad.
And
the
audio was rough on that one.
The content was great.
The content was phenomenal.
Hey, I can breathe clearly now.
Yes.
And it's not because of a neti pot. That's another thing.
We decided to make me Gandalf for this episode and Tori
I was Gandalf
Frodo.
last time. Hello, Master
Because
Frodo. Master Frodo. That's me.
The table is V-shaped. I want to be able to see and talk to you guys, but because of how 2D works,
Yep.
giving you all a lesson on dimensions.
You just get to be large.
Everyone on the side of the focal lens get warped. So
anyway, so thanks for watching. Appreciate having you. And let's see. If you're watching this the day that it releases and you're near Salt Lake City, go down to FanX because Dallin and Preston and I are going to be there walking around. We've tried to talk Tori into it. She is too cool for us, so she will
I'm not
be
too
there.
cool.
She's
I'm
busy
lame.
doing dungeon mistress-y things.
Yeah.
Can I tell you guys a funny story?
Please tell us a funny
Sure.
story.
yes.
So last week I went to the happiest place on earth.
Disneyland.
Thank you.
Oh.
No,
Oh.
world.
I was like,
That's the second happiest place
Matt
on earth.
Mercer's
Oh.
basement.
I'm
was-
coming for you, Flip.
Whoa.
Whoa.
It was in Matt Mercer's basement.
This is
Pretty
turning
exciting.
creepy.
So, one day I am traveling in a bus from my hotel to the Magic Kingdom. And I get on the bus and I sit down and this guy comes in and he is standing like directly in front of me and he puts his arm up to hold it like the pole. And on his forearm was this beautiful tattoo. And it was like kind of in the shape of a triangle, but it had all of the D&D dice.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh,
It was
nice.
like
Okay.
D20, D12. It had all of them down to D4. And I was like, should I talk to him about this? Should I not?
Yes.
Always.
Always
so he
talk
did.
to a nerd.
Yeah. And so I tapped him on the shoulder and I was like, oh my goodness, I love your tattoo.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, thanks. And I said, so do you play? And he looked at me like really confused. And I was like, D&D, do you play D&D? And he looked at me even more confused. And I was like, Dungeons and Dragons? And he goes, oh, yeah, I get that a lot. I just really liked the design of this tattoo. And it didn't have the dice numbers on it.
It's like when you get a Chinese tattoo and it's like, it's luck, but it really means like cat or something.
Yeah. And he's
Dumb
like, I just really like geometry. And I was like, okay, nerd. So
That's hilarious.
That's a good story.
That's a good story.
That hurts me.
Yeah.
Don't ever
me
tattoo
too.
something on you unless
don't
you
understand.
really want it.
He really
and
likes
you, and
geometry.
you mean it.
I'm like, and I recognize the irony of that, me thinking he's a nerd, but
That's really funny.
yeah, math nerds, man, that's a whole new breed.
I know.
Math nerds over here.
Polyhedral enthusiast is the.
Oh,
proper
is that
term.
okay? I will use that in the future.
All right, so I've got 2 topics, as I always do. First up, we have a quick ruling that I want to talk with you guys about, and then a longer conversation, a longer ruling. I need to come up with a better name for segment number 2.
Short rule, long rule.
Quick ruling and long tip.
Do not say that. Oh.
Cut.
Nope, we're live, baby.
Start over.
That was awesome. Okay. Anyway, as for the quick ruling, as usual, it is rather complicated. I don't know. Maybe this one isn't as complicated as some of them. So this past week, I did an episode on a monk tank, right over there, and in
Mank,
in
right?
it, what the mank? No, the tonk.
Tonk. Okay.
Tonk is
Got
much
it.
better.
Tonks.
Than mank. A question came up for me, and that I've thought about in the past, but in relation particularly to a monk ability, stillness of mind. Okay, stillness of mind tells us that when we get it at 7th level, you can use your action to end one effect on yourself that is causing you to be charmed or frightened. So it's going to cost your action, but you can use that action to, end a charmed or frightened effect on yourself. Now, I've seen a lot of people complain about this ability and say it's not very useful. In fact, it's largely useless because so many charmed and feared abilities sort of take control of you as a character and don't let you decide what you're going to do with your action.
Right. It's the purpose of the spell, yeah.
Right. So, for example, Dominate Person, right? Dominate Person says you can use your action to, among other things, in the spell description, you can use your action to take total and precise control of your target until the end of your next turn. The creature takes only the actions you choose and doesn't do anything that you don't allow it to do. During this time, you can also cause the creature to use a reaction, blah, blah, blah. Crown of Madness is similar, maybe not as powerful, but the charmed target must use its action before moving on each of its turns to make a melee attack against a creature other than itself that you mentally choose.
Dominate monster.
You, the spellcaster, right? The target can act normally on its turn if you choose no creature or if none are within its reach, so there's kind of a little way out there. But anyway, so the question is, like, which wins? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, can stillness of mind only work if, like, let's say I'm under the effect of like a dragon fear or something else that doesn't like control me? Because some people would say, well, the more, it's general specific, right? Like, which is more specific and which is more general. But
both
like,
pretty specific.
I don't know that there's like necessarily the monk ability is more specific. Right. No, the spell ability is more specific. Like, they seem to be in conflict with one another. I think most people, as far as I can tell, reading online and the forums and all of the things, seem to think that Dominate Person wins. Right. That because it says, they can only use their action to do what you tell them to do.
Right.
And stillness of mind
because you have to take an action.
Right.
Yeah.
But then I have seen people say, well, no, like, stillness of mind says you can use your action to end a charmed or feared effect on yourself.
Right.
It doesn't say unless like somebody else is not allowing you to use your action or whatever, but maybe that's just implicit. I don't know. So what do you guys think? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first, I guess.
I see both sides of this argument. So.
Okay. I think the monk ability wins because monks are weak and they need all the help they can get.
Fighting words.
No, really. But no, actually, I was looking into this. Jeremy Crawford has a tweet about this, and I agree with it. Let me just pull it up. So somebody asked him, can a monk use stillness of mind to remove the effects of Dominate Person? Can the caster prohibit such actions? And he says, a monk can use stillness of mind if the dominator doesn't forbid it, and the monk can take an action.
Okay.
So he kind of dances around it a little bit, but I think he's trying to say that you can use it unless they specifically say, you're a monk, I know you have stillness of mind, you can't use stillness of mind.
Right.
So, and that's for Dominate Person, right? And that one's a little more specific.
Dominate Monster.
Because Dominate Person has the, you choose their action for them, where a lot of the other ones are just like, you're scared and you have to run away, or you're whatever. So I think most of the time the stillness of mind wins. Okay. I think Dominate Person, there's a room for argument there, but I would still say that the stillness of mind wins out there.
As a lover of monks, I appreciate that, but you guys know my bias. You guys, anybody want to agree, disagree?
I'll disagree.
Good.
Okay.
Because to me, the verbiage with dominate person specifically, I just, you can't, it's controlling your action. So in my mind, I can't see how you could use your own action when you're being told what to do by someone else.
Sure.
I don't know.
I could see that. I think, though, the idea behind stillness of mind, right, is like a monk can just like, they're so in tune with their inner spirit or whatever, they can just like shake that off and like go like Zen mode or whatever.
That voice in the back of their head that whenever you see something like this happen in like a book or a movie, that like the little inner person is like, no, like break out of this brainwashing.
You have to
like,
wake up.
It's just stronger in monks.
Exactly.
Yeah. What you're saying.
Yeah. I'd say for mine, I can see both sides of the argument. I think that like if I was to go strictly, if I had a table that was very rules lawyery, I'd probably say the dominate person would probably supersede the monk. But I'd start to look at the difference between the levels that are required for each, because if one of them, someone has to take it up at a higher level, that's more of a sacrifice to me than something that, if it was something they got at second level or what have you. And so I guess it would be one of those kind of situational things to Dallin's point. If the big bad commands them to do something on one turn, but then kind of like turns his attention elsewhere and they're kind of not focusing on him, I would say, I'd allow the monk to start
or do
to
something
look at that.
like use their passive perception to see, like, do they know that this is coming?
Can you do it subtly enough that they don't know what's going on in your head?
Well, thank you for your rulings. Obviously, your mileage may vary depending on your DM and how they rolled at the table. I have a feeling that at most like Adventure League tables, that dominate person wins. Let me know if you have experience there.
Because as you know,
if you've seen this come up.
We don't.
I think the argument that people make, and maybe kind of to your point, Dallin, is like monks are weak, like they could use help, and if this level 7 ability doesn't work when you need it most, right?
Yeah.
Then it's kind of useless.
What's the point?
It's pretty lame. That said, there are plenty of spells and other things that happen in the game that cause you to be charmed or frightened that don't also like take direct control of you.
Right.
And so it's not like it would be completely worthless. But it would suck to like have this feature that you have because it already takes your action to use it. That's a fairly big sacrifice in and of itself. Right. And so to have it then also not work like when you need it most is like...
And there's those class features. It's the same thing with those situational spells that's like, I want to take breathe underwater or whatever, like, and then you end up in the desert, like, and you never use it. So it's those situational kind of features or spells that you choose that as a DM, I feel like it's our job to basically be like, okay, they took this for a reason. I want them to feel cool. I don't want to penalize them for being who they are. I want that class to shine. I don't want it to be the DC of D&D games where everything's the same. I want it to be, put some flavor in there. Yeah, at me in the comments. At me in the comments.
Them's
All right.
words.
Well, cool. Thank you. Let us know your thoughts. And again, like I say, how you've seen this ruled at your table, how you would rule it, particularly maybe if you have experience in like an Adventure League or playing with a DM who is a stickler for rules as written, et cetera, et cetera. And let's jump into the long tip. Sorry. Let's jump in.
So long.
Let's jump into the longer conversation. And we're back.
Thanks, sponsors.
All right. So as for the longer conversation, I've been thinking a lot lately about, in fact, I've been wanting to do this show for quite some time. It's been on my to-do list for my Slidin into my DMs for a while. A taunt is a term largely used in like online role-playing games, your World of Warcrafts, your whatever, where the tank character, the one who is meant to like protect and like absorb the damage and things like that, essentially casts the equivalent of a spell on like an enemy and taunts them, and then the enemy is like forced to attack them and not their allies, right? And part of the gameplay mechanic of these types of games is like to constantly make sure that like the monster is attacking you. There's not really an equivalent to that in D&D. There's some things that can kind of let you direct maybe once in a while where an attack is going to go, and then there are things that what I always refer to as like soft taunts, which are like basically like, you can like discourage them from attacking somebody else, or encourage them to attack you, like you give them disadvantage for attacking anyone other than you, that kind of thing. And I enjoy that kind of gameplay. I like playing an archetypal like character who's there to like sort of protect and defend their allies and stuff like that. That's fun. I think a lot of people do as well. What I see a lot of people suggest, and what I've seen happen at our own tables even sometimes, is where, you know, one of us or a character might sort of role play that taunt, right? And actually taunt an enemy and be like, your mother was a hamster, your father smelt of elderberries, you know, and in order to sort of goad them, and sometimes it works. A lot of times it works. I've seen it happen right at our own table where, you know, whoever's the DM, you know, controlling that monster or whatever might be like, ooh, they like get mad and they come and like take a swing at you.
Seems like that happens to Eve a lot because you call them really stinky.
They do stink.
Oh, you're troll.
The dankest swass.
So smelly.
So smelly. OMG.
Al.
And so I guess what I'm wondering is, like, how... Stop laughing at me.
I'm sorry. It was this.
Thinking about the
this is how I process. So what I'm wondering is, like, to what extent could a player abuse this in game? You know, how far would you allow this to go at your table? Is it advisable? Is this good gameplay, or is this trying to be metagamey? You know what I mean? Like, do you like to see this kind of thing where somebody tries to use like creative role play to almost impact the mechanics of the game, right? And how much is too much, maybe, right? What's just the right amount? What tips or advice would you have for somebody who might want to do this kind of thing more? Because you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with like encouraging great like role play, obviously. But yeah, like how far do we let this go? So let's maybe talk specifically about the taunt thing for just a second, and then we can kind of open it up to other potential, you know, uses you guys might see for this kind of thing. Would you allow this at your table where you know that somebody has built their character to be sort of like a beefcake, right? And they don't really have any abilities in their arsenal. Maybe they've used up all their resources or whatever, but they're like hurling insults at the enemies to try and encourage them to talk. Would you as the DM be like, okay, yeah, like you pissed off that monster, like he's gonna come attack you now? And like, would you allow that every single turn on every single combat? Or is this a once in a while type thing? Like what, how good does the taunt have to be before you allow, you know what I mean? Like, what are your thoughts?
Probably depends on the monster.
Sure.
A little bit. But okay. I love this kind of stuff because I really have a hard time with the rules sometimes of D&D. I feel like they are too constricting and like holds you back from really being creative and having fun sometimes, in my opinion. No, that may not be how you feel. Let me know. But I do think it depends on the villain. You know, I think if you're like fighting an ogre, they may or may not care. I don't know. If you're fighting someone like Strahd, he might be like, you're annoying. Like, stop. Sure. I'm all powerful and I will just kill you. Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Right.
I think I would allow it, not every turn, because that gets a little like breaking the game, I think, a little bit.
Sure.
But I would allow it, especially if the character was built for that in mind, to be the tank, and there's not really a taunt feature in D&D. So I would allow it. I think I'd base it off the monster's intelligence to see if they even like comprehend that they were being insulted.
Sure.
Or maybe they're
language.
Yeah, or do they speak the language? Or maybe they're so intelligent that they're like you're beneath me.
I can see what you're doing.
Yeah, like strong.
Yeah, so
would
kind
probably
of
be more.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of depends on the monster, like Tori said. But I would probably allow that for like a round or two every combat. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if they're physically like imposing and they're like getting in the way and they're like, getting in the person's face, I would say, yeah. I mean, I might, depending on the situation, I might institute like a persuasion check because, I mean, technically you're trying to persuade them to be angry, right?
Yeah. I like that, actually.
Like deception or something? Or
depending on what you're trying to do to get them either like, if you wanted them to back off, intimidation, if you want to get them like riled up, then persuading, or just a straight charisma check or something.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's going to suck for the barbarian or something if they're trying to be bear totem, get in their face and whatever.
Right.
But I think to Dallin's point, depending on how good the slander was, like if that was one of their favored enemies, like as a ranger, right? Yeah, absolutely. Like I'd say they could get under each other's skin because it's that whole like, what's up, knife ears? Like, like giving those kind of throwing those side eye slanderous comments.
I don't like the way you looked at me when you said knife ears.
That was pretty elfist, I have to say.
Yeah, because I always play an elf.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that you said like bringing the dice into it though, because then as a DM you can kind of keep it off of your plate, so you're not getting yelled at like you never let me use it. Like well, the dice rolled a 1, like I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
And in some situations, it's like, hey, they rolled like a 3. But their insult was really good. I'll give them inspiration on the spot so they can roll again.
Or you make the DC check like a 5.
Yeah, just make it low.
Yeah.
Like that insult was so good that your DC is very low.
If they have a hilarious roll table and I want to hear more, then maybe I'll have them roll again on the roll table to get more funny insults.
No, I like that. I think
you know all about that.
I think if you're going to allow for this kind of thing, I like the maybe requiring a persuasion check or something at least. If they're going to try and do it often, especially.
Yeah.
And maybe judging it based on the creativity of the taunt. Like, if not being a DM, right? If I were and one of my players was like, I taunt him, I'd be like, okay, like what do you say? You're ugly. I'm like.
Maybe you could do something.
Sorry, try again. Like not good enough.
Maybe I do something where it's like the DC is 10, and then their intelligence modifier is what goes up or down, like for that DC maybe or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have an insult generator.
Oh yeah.
Let's hear some.
Let's see. You're as powerful as a smooth talking bard at a Thanksgiving dinner.
I mean, that's pretty powerful, actually. That's a compliment. That's like the drunk uncle every Thanksgiving who brings up
it doesn't always work. Let's do another one.
I feel good.
You're just rolling a d20 for like part 1, part 2, part 3.
Find one of the veiled insults.
He's dumber than a loud-mouthed monk at the local Costco.
That's funny.
I love how Costco's in D&D. It's just Magic RS.
Does now.
Magic's RS.
He's got the Dankus
Manaport Magic Co.
We know he's got the Dankus West.
That's funny. Okay, so what other ways do you guys think you could use like creative roleplay to potentially affect the mechanics of the game in your favor? What advice would you have for somebody who is looking to like up their RP game? Even and actually this is going to be on point for my episode next week, which we can't point to because it's not out yet, and I'm not going to give any spoilers. But I will just say the character that I'm building for next week's episode, optimized episode, is like role play first focused, which is a first for me.
I love it already.
And so I'd like to kind of think about, in light of that character that is kind of bouncing around my brain right now, like how else could this character like affect gameplay and maybe even combat potentially without like being amazing at doing tons of damage or absorbing tons of damage or like great control on the battlefield, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
I don't know. What do you think?
I've got one thing as a DM that I've always liked when people try to do, and that's when they try and do like environmental damage to people. Like, I'm gonna do call lightning, but I want to hit the cliff and then have all the rocks tumble down on people. Like that, I like that. I think that's interesting. It's kind of sometimes difficult to figure out how much damage it's going to do. Like, you have to be like, well, am I going to do fall damage?
How far
like,
are the rocks
how
falling?
big are the rocks? Like, so it gets you got to be a little creative, but I think it adds like a level of intrigue to the game that you don't normally get. Also, like casting grease and then like fireball on grease and then it stays on fire for a couple rounds, like things like that. I've always liked that.
You're doing some Divinity Original Sin. Mixing up the spell effects stuff.
Cast tidal wave.
That's mostly for combat, though. Outside of that, I don't know. Do you guys have any?
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to anybody but I tend to lean a lot more towards the RP side of things. I enjoy combat, but RP is a lot of fun.
Preston likes to just like...
I'm going to blindfold him with my cape.
This is what your character is supposed to do.
My -1 strength character would like to grapple.
With my 8 strength rogue, I'm going to try and grapple this guy.
I would like to grapple this individual, he's restrained. Don't worry about it. But yeah, I mean, I think that for me it's that... if I wanted to play a transactional, and this is just for me, if I want to play a transactional where, I throw something, I do damage. They throw something at me, I do damage. To me, I like to like liven up that situation where it's like, hey, I want to, instead of just stabbing the ogre in the kneecap, I want to slide under his legs and try and slash at the insides of his thighs and like get around on the other side and then come out and do something cool.
You want a called shot.
A flourish.
You want a called shot mechanism in your D&D.
I have a feeling Corey's like, 4th edition drink.
So everybody just take a drink because
I feel like
because we know that there's somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think that for me, that livens up the combat a little bit. For instance, last Friday there was one of our mages, or not mages, I'm sorry, the wizard. He was in the front, and there was a bunch of these ghouls that came out and slashed at him, and he was paralyzed for the whole first round. So everything's just like wailing on him, and he's just sitting there getting beat. And finally, he breaks out of this concentration and casts chain lightning and kills everything in the room. But for him, it was like this. He had this visceral like, I want to be able to do this. Is this okay? And mechanically, he shouldn't have been able to hit everything. But I'm like, you know what? This is cool enough. Like, I'm gonna let him roast everything in its path.
So you might allow like a cool story moment or character moment to sort of supersede the rules, depending on the severity of the situation, how invested the character might be, or close to death, or if it's like some NPC that they have a grudge against from their backstory. Or
I'm absolutely going to let the person whose backstory it is. No one else kills that person, but the person who that backstory belongs to, because there's nothing less gratifying than being like, this is my nemesis. This is my, and then somebody else is like, oh, I'm going to cast magic missile.
Especially
I got him. Cool. Like
NPC.
Especially if it's an
NPC. Yeah. Like that's a no-go.
So here's a question about a called shot system, because I see this a lot. Well, I don't see it as much in our games these days as I used to. And as someone who tends to be a little bit of a rules stickler and stuff, right? I always, when somebody's like, I want to try to cut their foot off so that they can't walk anymore. And of course, in me, my brain's always like,
can't do that.
You can't, what do you mean? Like, you just make your attack, and then the DM maybe decides if something special happens. So, but that said, I can see the value, especially for a player who might find combat a little routine and a little boring and wants to mix it up. Me personally, I like just cutting a dragonborn in half every once in a while and feeling awesome that way.
Oh wait, no, it won't be up at this time.
Yeah, we're editing that one.
Never mind.
Spoiler. How might you mechanically, if a player were to say, I want to try and if they're standing against a wall, I'm going to shoot my arrow and try and pin their shoulder to the wall, or pin their cape to the cloak to the wall so that they can't move, or disarm them with an attack, or chop off their finger, or hamstring them, or whatever. Would you allow that? And
I don't like it.
And you don't like it.
I don't like it.
How? Yeah. Well, let me start with you, Preston, since you kind of mentioned it. How might you mechanically let that happen at your table in combat?
So one way if you're using any critical role content, Gunslinger, it has some of those pinning shots and some other things that kind of mechanically do a little bit of that. If somebody is like, hey, I want to shoot them in the eyeball and blind one of their eyes or something. Like if it was a called shot like that, again, I would probably say, okay, you can do that, but this is going to be you're shooting to hit their AC first, and then I need you to make me if it's an arrow, dexterity check to see if you actually hit, or if it just like
a high
hits them in the shoulder,
high AC,
or
depending on how difficult the shot is.
So like if it's their eyeball versus you're trying to hit them in the shoulder, like the AC of that is different. Just like the animate objects, right? The smaller the object, the higher the AC.
Sure.
I'd probably use that kind of a system if it happened frequently enough.
Dallin, what don't you like about
it's just
a system like that?
It complicates a game that already has like a lot of rules, and then as a DM, you gotta now try and calculate different ACs or whatever, and then is that going to be the same for each monster? Is that different? It just gets kind of out of hand, I think. So I would save called shots for like natural 20s. So if someone was like, I want to shoot him in the eye, I'd be like, okay, if you crit, then yeah, go for it. But otherwise, you hit him.
Just gonna hit him.
Yeah.
Or miss.
So I would just save it for criticals.
Okay. Simplifies it
Make
a
it
little bit.
simple.
What are your thoughts, Tori?
I would say either you hit and do your fantastic called shot, or you miss completely. I don't know. I would put some more risk into that.
Yeah.
To make them really want to do that.
It's like when you're playing pool and you say, hey, 8-ball corner pocket, and you hit it in the side pocket, you lose.
Yeah.
It ups the ante.
Sure.
Other thoughts though that I had on your original question. I think it would be fun to look at your character's like physicality, like their physical traits, right? So maybe you're playing an elf that is like morbidly obese. I think that'd be kind of fun.
Sure.
You could.
Why not?
I think elves just naturally like burn off all their calories.
That's what the whole that's what
Custom lineage.
That's what Tasha's was trying to get at, right? Like not all elves are just lithe and
That's
dexterous,
true.
right?
I rescind my statement. That's pretty.
Not all Thors are Chris Hemsworth.
All are, but some are chubby.
Chubby Thor. But something like that, or could you potentially use that to like lay on someone, pin him to the ground? I don't know. Awesome. I think that'd be fun. Maybe your character has like the super long braid, like Uno Mas, Shanghai Noon. He's got the big long braid.
Jackie Chan.
Yeah, can you use that to strangle someone with your braid?
For sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like.
But probably have to do like a grapple check. Like that would still be
right.
strength,
so
athletics.
That's where my brain goes anyway, right? It's like you want to lay on somebody, fine.
But we got to do it.
Like what you're doing is making a grappling check, and you're just flavoring it as laying on them, or as wrapping them up with your hair or something like that. But like it doesn't have to be that way, obviously, right? You could do it some other way.
I think it just keeps it fair, though, if you make sure that whatever they're trying to do has some corresponding check or rule or whatever to like have as a basis.
For sure.
Just to keep the game fair amongst all your players.
Sure.
So you're not letting somebody get away with crazy stuff every time, and then somebody else is,
I mean, I love
they're not creative.
One of the things I remember most about The Hook with Robin Williams, the little kid that sits at the top of the gangplank, and then he puts himself in a ball and rolls down and like smashes everybody. So like that's exactly where my mind went with that. Is like, I wouldn't let that happen every game, or I wouldn't let it happen every time because it's very situational. But like, finding a place that's appropriate to reward it without making or cheapening the experience for others.
And I think and this is where sometimes I struggle with the rules as written of D&D, is that I feel like sometimes that can take away the creativity, your creative license. And so it is a delicate balance of saying, yes, like the thing that drew me to D&D in the first place was like, you could do whatever you want. Like, that's so amazing. Like, you can come up with this character idea, and then you can find, a race and a class that fits into what you think you want to do. Like, I think that's so incredible. But if you take too many creative liberties, you get to the point where, it's game breaking, and it's like not fun for the other people
or it gets
who are
confusing
playing.
to expectations, what they can and can't do.
Right. Yeah, I totally get that, and I think that like philosophically, Dallin and I are probably a little are pretty aligned, and I think
You
Tori
two
and
are
Preston
probably.
are pretty aligned on like
We're the crazy ones.
like
You're all free-spirited hippies, and we're the like, get off my fresh green lawn.
or
Manicured by rules.
or that's not or I like what you said, Don. I think for me, you know what I mean, like you need to be careful because like if one player who's like always doing the crazy stuff and like, you know, and the DM is sort of allowing like whatever, then some of your players might feel like, well, like why did I make my character the way that I made them? Because like if I just
mechanically it doesn't matter.
Like, you know, blew my magic boogers on the enemy instead. Like it would be like way more powerful apparently. Like you know what I mean? Like
putting some constraints on it helps keep that from being.
Some balance.
It's not our fault they didn't build their character right, and we're being punished for it. It's the kind of thing.
It can feel that way. And that might be a little like, I guess the flip side of that would be what people who complain about optimizers, I think, would say, and that I've seen said, is like, you know, you by being like, no, like that's not right, and you're supposed to do it this way and that way, and like because otherwise, blah blah blah. Now you're ruining my fun. I don't want to have to feel like I have to make this like hyper optimized character in order to be effective in game, in order to be effective in combat, and because you did. Now you're like way better than everybody else and I feel lame by comparison. You know what I mean? So there's definitely two sides and you got to find
tough.
balance.
And I think as a DM you need to recognize though also like here's what my players what they like about this game.
Yeah.
Like I know that Colby loves to go into battle and just demolish every foe in his path. Like
and that's okay.
I know that he loves that. I know that Preston loves to be creative and do
stupid
crazy
things.
quirky things that like bring a little chaos to the game. Because that's fun and that's real life, right? Like there's chaos in real life, so it's fun to bring that in.
If you call it chaos, he's not going to like it as much.
Not chaos.
It's called optimized fun.
It's
optimized fun. I love that. That's what it is. So I think as a DM, you need to recognize what each of your players really loves about the game and then allow them to have those moments and let them shine in those moments. So, you know, Colby loves this. Let's let him
That's good.
Go hog wild.
Sure. And you know, the flip side of that obviously is if somebody wants to like play their character in a super creative way in combat and kind of use role play more than necessarily mechanics, like let them do something crazy or cool or weird, you know, once in a while and say, you know what, fine. Like maybe you have some structure around it still, right?
As long as it's not
you
disruptive.
got to make some sort of check based on your skill or your ability or whatever, and you know, don't go crazy on that just did like 5,000 damage to every enemy in the room because you know you wanted to like cut the rope of the chandelier that was hanging in the ceiling and have it drop on everybody instead of just make a weapon attack, right?
First you have to swing from it.
First you have to swing from the chandelier.
Then you got to sing Phantom of the Opera.
Check.
Then you drop it on the audience.
Performance check. Fall damage. It works. There's three things.
See?
No,
See? Structure.
It works.
You're right. And you know, to the Wizards of the Coast's credit, I feel like they've done a pretty good job of sort of trying to walk that fine line of saying, hey, look, DM, first up, like, it's your world, obviously, like, do what you want, rule of cool, like, use these rules as guides, but they've gotten a little bit better at kind of thinking about, okay, well, let's think about fall damage, and let's think about the speed at which you fall, and let's think about what happens if you fall on somebody, you know what I mean? And
you're morbidly obese.
Right. And making tweaks and adjustments to the rules, but again, always with the understanding that these are at the end of the day guidelines, and you know, you want to be able to have your players feel like they know what the expectations are, generally speaking, and so then can like plan accordingly, right?
Sure.
Because if like there's no rules, all bets are off, and like anything goes, then
it gets a little
like,
Wild West.
Yeah, that's frustrating too as a player to be like nothing that I've planned on like really matters, and like I don't know how to actually like function in this world anymore because like the rules aren't really applicable.
I think you have to strike a balance and say like, you can do that crazy thing, but it has to be within the system via a check or whatever.
Yeah.
And then like, I'm not going to punish you for trying to be creative. Like, I obviously want that, but I'm not going to let you just have free reign over everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, yes, go for it, be creative, but there's going to be checks and roles and stuff involved.
Right.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on, you know, ways that you have seen people at your table like use role play creatively in a way that actually affected the mechanics of the game. Good examples and bad examples, right? If you had one that you thought worked really well, if you had a player at your table that was constantly trying to abuse this sort of thing and it you know made it rough, let us know, because it's something that I've been thinking a lot about lately and want to continue thinking about more. So anyway, all right. Thanks for watching. I love you guys. You're
Send us
awesome.
pictures of your D&D tattoos.
Yeah.
Pictures
do it.
of your geometric patterons.
I just really love geometry.
That may or may not be D&D affiliated, though. If you're watching the show,
Tell
it's
us of your
probably D&D affiliated.
polyhedral passions.
Thanks as always to my DMs. You guys are awesome. I enjoy these conversations
As do we.
so much. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Take care.